نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي ربنا زدنا علما. Inshallah, we'll begin from bab number 57 today, أبواب صلاة الجماعة. باب يقوم عن يمين الإمام بحذائه سواء إذا كان اثنين. باب يقوم, he will stand عن يمين الإمام, on the right side of the imam, بحذائه, next to him, سواء, level, meaning in the same row. إذا كان اثنين, when they are two, meaning when two people are praying together, then how will they stand together? The imam, he will stand, and on his right side, who will stand? The ma'moom. Meaning the person who is following the imam, he will not stand on the left side of the imam, rather where will he stand? On the right side of the imam. And this is the sunnah. This was the way of the Prophet ﷺ. And also we see what is mentioned over here is بِحِذَائِهِ, meaning right next to the imam, such that sawa'an, both are standing in the same row. Because when there are more than two people praying together, then the imam stands in front of the people. But when there are only two people praying together, then the imam and the person praying with him will stand together right next to each other. Some ulama said that the imam should stand, a step ahead. Alright? But we see from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that no, the imam and the ma'moom both should be in the same row. Meaning the saf, the row, should be formed such that both are standing next to each other. And the evidence of this is حدثنا سليمان بن حرب قال حدثنا شعبة عن الحكم قال سمعت سعيد بن جبير عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما قال, he said, Ibn Abbas said, بِتُّ في بيت خالتي ميمونة. I stayed the night at the house of my khala, my aunt. And who was she? Maymuna. And she was the wife of the Prophet ﷺ. So during the night, what happened? فَصَلَّى رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ الْعِشَاءَ. He performed the Isha prayer. ثُمَّ جَاءَ فَصَلَّى أَرْبَعَ رَكَعَاتٍ. Then when he came home, he performed 4 rak'ah. And after performing those 4 rak'ah, what happened? ثُمَّ نَامَ. Then he went to sleep. ثُمَّ قَامَ. Then during the night, he stood up. فَجِئْتُ. He stood up, meaning in order to pray. فَجِئْتُ. So I also came. فَقُمْتُ عَنْ يَسَارِهِ. And I stood on his left. So Ibn Abbas, a young boy, he saw the Prophet ﷺ praying the night prayer. He also got up in order to join him. But where did he join him? On his left. فَجَعَلَنِي. So he put me عَنْ يَمِينِهِ, on his right. How? That he moved him. Right? فَصَلَّى خَمْسَ رَكَعَاتٍ. And the Prophet ﷺ performed 5 rak'at. ثُمَّ صَلَّى رَكَعَتَيْن. And then he performed 2 rak'at. ثُمَّ نَامَ. Then he went to sleep. حَتَّى سَمِعْتُ غَطِيطَهُ. Until I heard his غطيط, meaning I heard him snoring. أو قال خطيطه. Same thing. ثُمَّ خَرَجَ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ. And then he went for the prayer, meaning for the Fajr prayer. So we see that in this incident, we learned that Ibn Abbas came and stood on the left side of the Prophet ﷺ, but because there were only 2 people, the Prophet ﷺ moved him to his right side. Because that is the proper way, that the person who is praying with the imam should stand on his right side when there are only 2 of them. Bab إذا قام الرجل, when a man stands عن يسار الإمام, on the left side of the imam. So what should the imam do? Should he just let him be, or should he move him? فَحَوَّلَهُ الْإِمَامُ. So the imam should move him إِلَى يَمِينِهِ, to his right. And if the imam is moving him, now obviously the imam is making some kind of movement, right? Either he's going to move the person, with his arm or his hand or something, and the person is going to walk from the left side of the imam to the right side of the imam. Is this going to corrupt the prayer of the imam or the person standing with him? No. لَمْ تَفْسُدْ صَلَاتُهُمَا. It does not invalidate the prayer of either of them. Because even though the imam is moving and the ma'moom is moving, but remember that this movement is for the purpose of perfecting the prayer. And any movement that is not part of the prayer, but it is done during the prayer in order to perfect the prayer, that movement is permissible. You understand? So for example, if a person is praying, and when they started their prayer, they made sure that their hijab, everything was fine. But during the prayer, they feel that their hijab is going to fall off. So now they're moving in order to fix their hijab. Or somebody comes, like a child comes and pulls on their hijab and it's almost about to fall off. Right? They took care of it before they started the prayer, but during the prayer something happened, and because of that they have to move. Now, is that movement going to corrupt the prayer? No, it is not going to invalidate the prayer. Why? Because it is for the purpose of perfecting the prayer. Likewise, when people are praying together and suddenly somebody has to move and leave the prayer, and the rest of the people, they come together, they move a step ahead or a step to the right or to the left in order to fill in the gap, does that invalidate the prayer? No, it doesn't. Lam tafsud salatuhuma. So we see that whether the imam moves or the people behind him, they move. If it's for the purpose of perfecting, improving the prayer, then that movement is completely permissible. حدثنا أحمد قال حدثنا ابن وهب قال حدثنا عمرو عن عبد ربه بن سعيد عن مخرمة بن سليمان عن كريب مولى ابن عباس عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما قال نمت عند ميمونة. It's the same hadith but just narrated differently. Earlier we learned bittu, over here we learned nimtu, meaning I slept. عند ميمونة والنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عندها تلك الليلة. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم was in her house that night. فتوضأ, then he performed wudu. ثم قام يصلي, then he stood in order to pray. فقمت على يساره, and I stood on his left. فأخذني, so he took hold of me. فجعلني عن يمينه, and then he placed me on his right side. فصلى, so it shows that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم took hold of Ibn Abbas, perhaps by his hand, right, and moved his head, okay, and found that Ibn Abbas perhaps understood that I'm supposed to go on his right side. So there was a lot of movement over here. فَصَلَّى ثَلَاثَ عَشْرَةَ رَكَعَةً. In the previous hadith we learned that he performed how many rak'ah? Khamsa. And then after that he performed 2 rak'ah. Right? In the previous one, فَصَلَّى خَمْسَ رَكَعَاتٍ ثُمَّ صَلَّى رَكْعَتَيْنِ. Over here we see that he فَصَلَّى ثَلَاثَ عَشْرَةَ رَكَعَةً. How many? 13 rak'at. ثُمَّ نَامَ حَتَّى نَفَخَ. Then he went to sleep until he نَفَخَ, meaning he exhaled deeply. And that is a sign of deep sleep, almost snoring. وَكَانَ إِذَا نَامَ نَفَخَ. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he used to sleep, he would نَفَخَ, he would exhale deeply, meaning you could hear his heavy breathing. So it shows that this is, it's perfectly normal in the sense that if a person does it, it doesn't mean that there's something rude or... Because when a person is sleeping, the sound that's coming from their mouth or from their nose is not in their control. ثُمَّ أَتَاهُ الْمُؤَذِّنِ. Then the mu'adhin came to him. فَخَرَجَ فَصَلَّى وَلَمْ يَتَوَضَّأ. Then he went out to pray, but he did not perform wudu. قال عمرو فحدثت به بكيرا فقال حدثني كريب بذلك. Now we read this hadith earlier in Kitab al-Wudu in detail, and we also learned the issue of wudu. But we see here that from this hadith, many scholars, they have derived that sleep in itself does not invalidate wudu, because this sleep was short, okay, even though it was deep, but it was very short, because he slept for a very brief amount of time after his prayer. Some ulama said that the prophets are different. When they're sleeping, their heart is still awake, so they know if they have lost their wudu or not. But others said that the Prophet ﷺ did this action, Ibn Abbas witnessed him. So if a person is in a sitting position, for example, and he dozes off for a few moments, right, that does not invalidate his wudu. Likewise, if a person is sitting and they just put their head on the bed or in a chair and they doze off for a couple of minutes, or they fold over and they doze off for a couple of minutes, that in itself will not nullify the wudu. A person must have that feeling that, okay, yeah, I didn't break my wudu. The scholars have put those conditions, but like from this hadith, what do we see? The Prophet ﷺ, he was sleeping, he was snoring, right? So from this, they have said that sleep in itself does not break wudu. But if a person is sleeping for a long time, like for example the whole night long, for like 3-4 hours, then obviously when he will wake up, he will be in a completely different state. He needs to freshen up. But let's say you're performing your prayer, and as you're doing your adhkar, you fall asleep. And then you wake up and you see the time, and it's only been 10 minutes or so, right? And you feel perfectly fine, so you can get up and pray. But if you feel like, no, it was like really deep sleep and I don't even know if I have my wudu still, I feel like I need to go to the bathroom, then in that case it's safer to perform wudu. Bab إِذَا لَمْ يَنْوِ الْإِمَامُ. When the imam does not yanwi. What does yanwi mean? It is from niyyah. Niyyah is intention. So when he does not make the intention. So when the imam does not have the intention to do what? أَن يَؤُمَّ, to lead the people in prayer. Meaning, here is a man, he's standing in prayer, and he doesn't have the intention of leading people in prayer. He just went to the masjid, and he started praying himself. But what happened? ثُمَّ جَاءَ قَوْمٌ, then some people came, and they joined him. فَأَمَّهُمْ, so he leads them in prayer. So, this man goes to the masjid, he says, Allahu Akbar, he starts performing his salah. A second person, he walks into the masjid, he sees this gentleman performing the salah, so he says, I have to perform my nafil, I might as well join him. Or I missed my jama'ah, I might as well join him, I'll get the reward of jama'ah. You understand? So he joins him, and he stands right next to him. Now, the first person, he didn't have the intention of being the imam. Now he has to lead. So what do we see here? That it is permissible for him to do that. Okay? And he must, because the other person has joined him now, so he must lead the prayer. Now how will he lead the prayer? Wherever he is going to start performing the prayer as if he was the imam. So for example, if he is standing in qiyam, he just got up from his rak'ah, he's standing in qiyam, and let's say it's the time of Isha, so he's going to start reciting out loud. Okay? Or let's say he's in ruku', and this person joins him. So when he gets up, how is he going to say Sami Allahu liman hamida? Out loud. Okay? Just like an imam does. So he is going to take on the role of imam, even though he did not start the prayer as imam. So the issue over here is that a person did not start the prayer as imam. Can he take on the role of imam during the prayer? Yes, he can. But, the other person who's come, he might be performing his Isha. Other person who has come to join him, he's joining him in prayer. Jama'ah is mainly for which salah? Fard, right? So the person who's joining him, most probably he's joining him for Isha. Right? So for that purpose, he should recite out loud. If he's praying by himself, alone, he doesn't have to recite out loud. When a person is performing prayer himself, okay, he does not do jahr. When a person is performing prayer himself. But when he's leading others in prayer, then Fajr, Maghrib and Isha, they are jahr. When he's leading, then he will recite out loud. Of course, it applies to women also. Of course, a little bit is fine, but not out loud completely. Of course, you can hear. So for example, Alhamdulillah, Ar-Rahman, Iyaka. This is fine. But Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, this is jahr. Okay? This is in Jama'ah. Okay? So what's the evidence of this? حدثنا مسدد قال حدثنا إسماعيل بن إبراهيم عن أيوب عن عبد الله بن سعيد بن جبير عن أبيه عن ابن عباس قال بت, he said, I spent the night عند خالتي, near my khala, meaning in her house. فقام النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يصلي من الليل, he stood up in order to perform the prayer at night. فقمت أصلي معه, so I also got up in order to pray with him. فقمت عن يساره, I stood on his left. فأخذ برأسي, he took my head. فأقامني عن يمينه, and he made me stand on his right side. So this is where we learn how the Prophet ﷺ moved him. Okay. Now, what do we see? The Prophet ﷺ, he started the prayer himself. Okay. Not with the intention of being imam. But what happened? During his prayer, Ibn Abbas joined him. So then the Prophet ﷺ leading the prayer as imam. You understand? Now, which prayer was this? It was during the night. Was it fard? What was it? It was tahajjud. It was nafil prayer. Right? So we see that in the nafil prayer, the Prophet ﷺ was performing nafil, Ibn Abbas was performing nafil. Okay? So Ibn Abbas joined him in nafil. So first of all, this shows that nafil prayer can be performed in congregation. There is absolutely no harm. And especially if there is someone who knows more Quran than you, who recites better than you, and you happen to be in the same place, then you might as well pray together, because you will get the reward of Jama'ah also. So we see that nafil prayer can be performed in congregation. So this leads us to the Ramadan issue. I mean, people do have an objection that at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, this was not a usual habit of the Sahaba to come together in the masjid and perform Qiyamul Layl in Jama'ah. But we see that the Prophet ﷺ did lead the people at certain occasions, and we see that most of the people at that time, what were they? Huffaz. They knew the Quran. So they were capable of performing the prayer themselves. But yet the Prophet ﷺ led them in prayer at certain times. Now, when the majority of the people is such that they don't know the Quran, then what is better? That someone leads them. Alright? And we see that this is exactly what happened over here. Ibn Abbas went and joined the Prophet ﷺ. Now, with regards to this issue, joining a person in prayer so that they become the imam. Remember, there are three opinions amongst the scholars concerning this issue. Some scholars say that it is not permissible. It is not permissible. They say that if a person started his prayer himself, he cannot become the imam during the prayer. Strange, I know, but this opinion exists, and it's a very common opinion, in fact. So that's the opinion they follow, that the person who is the imam must have the intention of being the imam before starting the prayer. So they say that a person cannot shift his niyyah, cannot change his niyyah, cannot change his role from fard salah to jama'ah during the prayer. You understand? They said a person cannot become imam during the prayer. But this clearly contradicts the sunnah. It clearly contradicts the sunnah. I mean, they did, like for example, there's another incident also which we will learn about Mu'adh bin Jabal, that he used to pray with the Prophet ﷺ, and later on he used to go and lead others. And other incidents also where, somebody became the imam, joined later, and they said that the Prophet ﷺ was unaware of the incident. But the fact is that you cannot say that the Prophet ﷺ was unaware, because what's the evidence of that? And secondly, if the Prophet ﷺ was unaware, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was fully aware, and the Sharia was being established. Alright? Ibn Abbas joined him in prayer. If it was not correct, the Prophet ﷺ would not have allowed him, and he would have corrected him later on. And if the Prophet ﷺ did not know, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have made it clear. Right? Because the Sharia was being established. So anyway, this opinion is far from the Sunnah. There's another opinion. The second opinion amongst the scholars is that it is permissible. A person may start his prayer himself and become imam during that prayer. This is permissible in his fard prayer, and it is also permissible in his nafl prayer. You understand? It is permissible in his fard prayer, it is also permissible in his nafl prayer. Now for example, over here, this was nafl, in the night prayer, right? Now let's say there is a person in the masjid. He goes in the masjid, there is nobody there. He gives the adhan, he gives the iqamah. Nobody there. Now what is he going to do? He's just going to start the prayer himself. Right? Now let's say he's giving the iqamah. Okay? Still nobody shows up. But the masjid is big, somebody has entered the masjid. They can hear the iqamah. But the imam doesn't know somebody has entered. The imam says, okay, nobody's here, I'm just going to start the prayer myself. So he just says Allahu Akbar and he starts the prayer himself. Now he's praying himself. Now the person who walked into the masjid, he knows for sure that he's praying fard. Okay? Can he join him? Of course. What if he doesn't know? What if he missed it completely? He doesn't know whether that man is praying fard or nafl. Can he still join him? Yes, he can. Because the fact is, the person who's joining, he doesn't know how this person started his prayer. Is he performing his fard? Is he performing his nafl? He doesn't know. Alright? So he can join him. This is permissible for fard, and it is also permissible for nafl. Now each person will have their own niyyah. You understand? Each person will have their own niyyah. Mu'adh bin Jabal used to pray with the Prophet ﷺ, and then he would go and lead some other people in Isha prayer. Okay? In another masjid. So his first salah was fard, and his second was nafl. And the people praying behind him, they were performing their fard. You understand? So it doesn't matter whether the niyyah matches or not. Okay? This is permissible in fard and it is also permissible in nafl. Now, some said that, but this happened in nafl. How can you apply that to fard? What is permissible in fard you can apply in nafl. But can you apply what is permissible in nafl to fard? Yes, you can. What is permissible in prayer in nafl is also permissible in fard. Remember that. Unless there is an evidence that proves otherwise. Okay? For example, the Prophet ﷺ, he used to perform prayer while traveling on his camel. Right? On the camel. But which prayer was that? Nafl prayer. Now, does this mean that we can also perform fard prayer on a ride? No, we know that you can't do that. Why? Why can you not apply what is permissible in nafl on the fard? Why can you not do that over here? Because when the Sahaba narrated this incident, they made it clear that the Prophet ﷺ used to pray on his mount, غَيْرَ أَنَّهُ لَا يُصَلِّي عَلَيْهَا الْمَكْتُوبَةِ. They clarified that he would not perform the maktuba, meaning the fard prayer, on his ride. So remember this principle. Whatever is permissible in nafl is also permissible in fard. Okay? Unless there is an evidence that proves otherwise. But this is a general principle. So we see that the Prophet ﷺ was performing nafl prayer. Somebody came and joined him. This was nafl. Can the same rule be applied to fard? Yes. Why? Because there's nothing preventing that. So you see, now for example, a person is praying himself. Okay? He is performing 2 rak'ah. That's his intention. Okay? He's in his second rak'ah. Somebody comes and joins him in the second rak'ah. Then he becomes the imam. Now this person who's come and joined him, how much salah will he be able to perform with the imam? 1 rak'ah, right? So now what is he going to do? When the imam says his salam, he's just going to get up and complete his prayer. Alright? Now, what if the ma'moom, he wanted to perform 4 rak'ah? What is he going to do then? Same thing, just like you do behind an imam. Right? That as soon as he says the salam, you get up and complete whatever you need to. I mean, in that case, then remember that the ma'moom has to follow the imam. Okay? Ma'moom has to follow the imam. He cannot say, okay, no, I only want to pray 2 rak'ah, so I'll just stop here. No, he has to follow the imam. In Ramadan, this happens a lot. That by the time people come into the masjid, the fard is already over. And the tarawih has begun. So what should they do? Many people, they will not join the jama'ah. They will pray their isha themselves and then they will join the imam. But what should they do? They should join the imam. Alright? And the imam, he's performing his nafl. But you can perform your fard. It doesn't matter if the intention is different. Alright? If the imam is performing his fard or his nafl, I mean, he doesn't need to change his niyyah. And, I mean, how can he communicate with the other? Would you like me to lead you in 4 or 2? There's no communication. Right? Okay, so these are the 2 opinions. And then there's a third opinion, which is that some ulama, they allowed it, they made it permissible in nafl prayer, but not in fard. So they said that if a person is performing his nafl, you can join them. Or if you want to perform your nafl, and you see somebody performing prayer, you can join them. But if a person is performing their fard, you cannot join them. Okay? So they differentiated between nafl and fard. But again, how can you know what the intention of the person was? You don't know what they're praying. You have no idea. Even if they're praying 4, how can you know for sure if they're praying their sunnah or their fard or their nafl? You have no idea. So remember, the general principle is that what is permissible in nafl is also permissible in fard. And this was the opinion of Ibn Taymiyyah as well as Shaykh al-Sa'di and Shaykh bin Uthaymeen amongst the recent scholars. Bab إذا طول الإمام وكان للرجل حاجة فخرج فصلى. إذا طول الإمام, طول is from طول, طويل. طويل is to be long. تطويل is to make something long. So طول الإمام, the imam lengthens the prayer, meaning he makes the prayer very long. وَكَانَ لِلرَّجُلِ, and for a person who's praying behind him, there is a hajah, he has some need, an urgent need to fulfill. Now this person, if he carries on behind the imam, God knows when the salah is going to end. But there's an urgent need that he needs to fulfill. There's no way that he can delay it. So in this situation, can the ma'moom فَخَرَجَ, can he leave the prayer and فَصَلَّى and then perform his own prayer? Yes, he can. Okay? Now, in the previous bab, we learned about joining the imam. Right? Joining a person in prayer and having them be your imam. This bab is about leaving the imam. Okay? Can you join the imam? Yes, you can. Can you leave the imam? Yes, you can. But there better be a good reason. Haja. Okay? Now, what does it mean by kharaja fasalla? He leaves the prayer of the imam. He gets out of that. So when he gets out of that, he has many options. Either he can continue the prayer on his own. So for example, the imam is reciting Surah al-Baqarah. He finished Surah al-Baqarah and then he started reciting Surah al-Imran. And it's still the first rak'ah. So this man says, Allahu A'lam how much Qur'an he's going to read in the second rak'ah. I don't have the capacity to do that. So what does he do? He just steps aside and he goes off to the side and he continues the prayer by himself. So from that, qiyam, he goes on to his ruku', he performs his salah. Let's say it was a second rak'ah. So, فَخَرَجَ, he leaves the imam, and what does he do? He moves on to his third rak'ah and fourth rak'ah, and he ends the prayer. Okay? This is one option. Another option is فَخَرَجَ, that he breaks the prayer. He leaves the prayer, meaning he breaks it. And then فَصَلَّى, he prays by himself at his house or wherever he has to go. So for example, he's standing next to the imam, for example. So he just moves back, takes a step back and moves on to the right or to the left, right? And continues by himself. If he's standing behind the imam towards the end of the row or the side of the row, he will just take a step back and move a little away from the jama'ah. Alright? If that's possible, if that is an option. But if he has to walk all the way out of the masjid, because sometimes the masjid may be full, he may not find any room to do that. So then he has to break his prayer. Right? So he breaks his prayer, فَصَلَّى, and he prays himself at the back of the masjid, outside the masjid, at his house, wherever. No, then he's just cancelled the prayer that he started with the imam, and he's going to pray, a new prayer afterwards, right? His own prayer. Because haja, it could be an urgent need, right? So for example, the imam is performing really, really long salah, and there's a sick person at home, for example. For that reason, obviously, the person will have to break the prayer, but like the phone is ringing continuously. I mean, it's going to be an emergency, and you don't know how long you're going to be in the prayer. Let's say there's a person who's a doctor who's on call, right? He's standing in prayer, and the imam is reciting like a really long surah. If it's a short surah, the habit of the imam, that the salah will be over within 5 minutes. So that hopefully it can wait. But if the imam is performing the salah really long, then he has to break the prayer, right? That a woman, she has a child and she's in a big masjid and the child is crying, okay, nowhere to be seen, nowhere to be heard. Right? And now in that situation, she could lose her child. She really could. You don't know where the child is. He might hurt himself. So in that situation, is she allowed to leave the prayer? Yes, she is allowed to. I mean, she's allowed to leave the prayer. And I mean, whatever she got of the prayer, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is appreciative. Right? I mean, depending on the situation. Now, one thing that needs to be made clear is that إِذَا طَوَّلَ الْإِمَامِ, when the imam makes the prayer long, then there is a haja. Okay? Then a person can leave. Now, what is tatweel? What does it mean to make the prayer long? Tatweel is when the salah is longer, lengthier than the salah of the Prophet ﷺ. Okay? So, what was the usual way of the Prophet ﷺ? What was his way? How would he lead? What surahs would he recite? What surahs did he tell people to recite in certain prayers? Now, the Prophet ﷺ, he did recite long surahs in his nafl. But in fard, did he do that? No, he didn't. I'm talking about surah like, let's say Surah al-Baqarah. Would he ever recite that in Isha? Never. He wouldn't do that. Surah An-Nisa, would he recite that in Isha? No. He wouldn't. So if a person is reciting Surah Al-Ma'idah, okay, and they're just reciting and reciting and reciting, 1 page, 2 pages, and you're like, it's been at least 10 minutes. You don't know when the Imam is going to stop. This is what? Tatweel. So Tatweel is ma kharaja an sunnah, what is over and beyond, more than the Sunnah. Okay? More than the Sunnah. Then there's takhfif. What is takhfif? That which is light, right? To lighten, to keep it short. And takhfif is ma wafaqa sunnah, what is according to the Sunnah. Because there were certain prayers in which the Prophet ﷺ did perform long qiyam. So for example, Salatul Khusuf. Khusuf prayer, the eclipse prayer, how was that? How was the qiyam? Long. So much so that Asma radiallahu anha, what happened? She fell unconscious because of the heat also and the length of the prayer, and she started sprinkling water on her face, as we learned earlier, right? So that was very, very long. But remember that that was still the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. It was an exceptional situation. It was for the eclipse prayer that he performed such long qiyam. Likewise, on Friday, Fajr, the Prophet ﷺ, he would recite Hamim as-Sajda and also Surah Al-Insan. Now they're not short surahs in the sense that half a page long. They're over a page and a half, to almost, depending on the size of the mushaf, more than a page, almost 2 pages. Right? Sajda in fact is a bit longer than that, a little over 2. So now if the Imam is reciting these 2 surahs, or surahs that are similar to them in length, in Fajr prayer, is that tatweel? That is not tatweel. That is what? Takhfif. That is keeping the salah light according to the Sunnah. Alright? Ma wafaqa sunnah. From muwafiq, that which corresponds to the Sunnah. Likewise, we learned that the Prophet ﷺ, he would recite up to 100 verses in Fajr. Right? So much so that he would begin the prayer when it was dark, and when he would end the prayer, it would be a bit bright, so people could actually see one another. So that also shows that the qiyam in Fajr was long. Now, is that tatweel? Is that making the prayer extra long? No. That is still according to the Sunnah, so that will be considered as takhfif. Tafriq. What is tafriq? What is even less than the Sunnah? Okay? So for example, a person is reciting Surah Al-Asr in Fajr, 1 rak'ah, okay, and Surah Al-Kawthar in the other rak'ah. Salah is valid, but is it according to the Sunnah? No. Is that tatweel? No. What is it? Tafriq. What is the best way? Takhfif. Tafriq is what is less than the Sunnah. So, reciting less than what the Prophet ﷺ would usually recite in prayer. Yeah. So for example, for Fajr, the Prophet ﷺ would recite, like I mentioned to you, Surah Al-Insan, right? So less than that. For Dhuhr, for Asr, for Isha, for Maghrib, inshallah we can discuss that as to what exactly he would recite. But in many books you will find that. Inshallah, for Isha we will learn about which kind of surahs the Prophet ﷺ encouraged people to recite. Okay? Inshallah, the hadith hopefully we will cover today. حدثنا مسلم قال حدثنا شعبة عن عمرو عن جابر بن عبد الله أن معاذ بن جبل كان يصلي مع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ثم يرجع فيؤم قومه. He would go and lead his people. He would perform the prayer with the Prophet ﷺ, then he would go to his people and lead them. The hadith continues, وحدثني محمد بن بشار قال حدثنا غندر قال حدثنا شعبة عن عمرو قال سمعت جابر بن عبد الله قال كان معاذ بن جبل يصلي مع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ثم يرجع فيؤم قومه. He would go and lead his people in prayer. فصلى العشاء. Then one night he went and he led them in prayer. Which prayer was this? Isha. فقرأ بالبقرة. And he actually recited Surah Al-Baqarah. So what happened? فَانْصَرَفَ الرَّجُلُ. So a man, he just left. He broke the prayer and he left. فَكَأَنَّ مُعَاذًا. So it was as though Mu'adh تَنَاوَلَ مِنْهُ. He disliked that. He was upset with that man, that why did you leave me in prayer? Why did you do that? Why did you break the prayer when I was leading you? Because it's offensive, right? When a person is leading, and here is a man who just leaves the prayer and goes away. فَبَلَغَ النَّبِيُّ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. So this news, it reached the Prophet ﷺ. فَقَالَ, so he said, فَتَّانٌ 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 ثَلَاثَ مِرَارٍ. 3 times he said, Fattan. Who is Fattan? One who puts in fitna. Meaning you are Fattan. You are putting people in fitna. And Fattan, you're putting people in a lot of fitna. Then you're putting them in such a difficult situation. And you see, fitna is what? Stopping the people from the deen. Right? Now when people are going to be led in prayer, and the prayer is going to be made so difficult for them, are they not going to be prevented from participating in Jama'ah? Right? Are they not going to be prevented from completing the salah? Yes. So fattanun 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 salata mirarin, aw qala fatinan fatinan fatinan, or he said fatin. Wa amarahu bi surataini, and he instructed him to recite 2 surahs min awsatil mufassal, from the awsat mufassal surahs. Qala Amrun la ahfaduhuma. Amr said, I do not remember which 2 surahs it was, but it was 2 surahs from the awsat mufassal. Now, what do we learn from here? That the Prophet ﷺ encouraged him to read, instead of Surah Al-Baqarah, what? 2 surahs from awsat mufassal. Now, mufassal surahs are those surahs which are to the end of the Quran, from Surah Qaf to Surah An-Nas. Surah Qaf to Surah An-Nas. And these are in 3 sections. Okay? The first part is Tiwal Mufassal, the long Mufassal surahs. And which ones are they? From Surah Qaf to Amma. Okay, Surah Qaf to Amma Yatasa'alun, Surah Naba. These are which ones? Tiwal Mufassal, the longer of the Mufassal surahs. And you notice that in the Quran, right? It begins with lengthy surahs, and as you reach the end, the surahs become shorter and shorter and shorter. Right? Then the second part is Awsat Mufassal. Awsat Mufassal. And these are from Surah Naba to Surah Duha. So which ones are they? Nazi'at, right? Abasa, Takwir, Infitar, Mutaffifin, Al-Inshiqaq, Al-Buruj, Al-Tariq, Al-A'la, Al-Ghashiyah, Al-Fajr, Al-Balad, Al-Shams, Al-Layl. Right? So all of these surahs are which ones? Awsat Mufassal. And the third section is of Qisar Mufassal, the even shorter ones, Qisar, the shorter ones. And which ones are they? From Surah Al-Duha to Surah An-Nas. Okay? Now, which ones did the Prophet ﷺ tell Mu'adh bin Jabal to read in Isha? 2 from Awsat Mufassal. So for example, Surah Al-Layl, Surah Al-Shams together. Okay? 2 surahs in 1 rak'ah. Or Surah Al-Naba is long, but it's of medium length, so Surah Al-Naba in 1 rak'ah, for instance. Surah Al-Nazi'at, let's say broken over 2 rak'ah. Right? Surah Abasa in 1 rak'ah, Takwir in the other rak'ah. Okay? So these are the surahs that the Prophet ﷺ encouraged him to pray in Isha. And it's an excellent way of reviewing the surahs that one may have memorized. Because these long surahs are such that they're also very similar. Right? Like Surah Takwir, Surah Al-Infitar, and they're very similar. If you make a habit of reading these surahs in Isha, then inshallah you'll remember them. The only way of retaining them is by reviewing them. And the best way of reviewing them is in the prayer. Right? So if you begin it like this, that one day recite Surah An-Naba, the next day recite the next surah, and this way inshallah you will also get to review. Yes, go ahead. You see, unfortunately these days many people, the only time they will hear the Quran is in salah at the masjid. That's the only time they'll hear it. Or in Ramadan they will hear it. So the Imam will read these surahs, but there are times when he will also read, let's say, a page, okay, from Surah Al-Ma'idah, for instance. But it's the same length. You understand? If it's the same length, inshallah it's according to the Sunnah. It is takhfif. But if it's more than that, then it will be tatwil. That is also possible. That is good. That, it's the length is according to the Sunnah. Okay? But again, the choice of surahs should be closer to the sunnah also. Okay? Because that would be better. That would definitely be better, closer to the sunnah. In fact, I was listening to the lecture by Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah of these hadith, and he said the same thing, that some imam, what they do is that they will read the same length of the Quran, of surahs from the beginning, surah Alif Lam Mim to An-Nas, and this way they will review the whole Quran. He said it's good, but what is better is that you read these surahs in Isha. Just like for Fajr, on Friday you will read Sajda and Insan. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ read those surahs, so why not? So he told Mu'adh bin Jabal to read 2 surahs from the Mufassal surahs in Isha. So closer to the Sunnah is better. But again, if you think about it, when else do people hear the Quran? Of course, yes. From Naba to Duha, these surahs mention the Qiyamah also a lot. And they're also easy to memorize actually. They're easy to memorize. And you see, if people hear these surahs over and over again in Isha, children from a young age, then what will happen? At least they'll memorize these surahs, right? Okay. So we see from this hadith that if a person finds the prayer of the Imam too long, and there is an urgent need that he has to fulfill, then he is allowed to break the prayer. There is no sin on him for doing that. Even if the hajah becomes, the prayer is too long, I don't have the strength to stand anymore, I'm too sleepy, I'm too tired. These days, for example, Isha is so late. After a whole day of work and a tiring evening, a person goes to the masjid while he's yawning, he's exhausted, and the Imam is performing the prayer, but he's reading a very long surah, and the person does not find in himself the strength to stand anymore. Then why pray with a heavy heart? Right? Why pray with a heavy heart? So if a person leaves the prayer, there's no sin on him, as long as he completes his prayer afterwards. باب تخفيف الإمام في القيام وإتمام الركوع والسجود. تخفيف. So remember, tatwil is to make it longer than the sunnah. Takhfif is to shorten, but shorten according to how? The sunnah. Keep it short, but according to the sunnah. So takhfif al-imami fil qiyam. So the imam in the qiyam, he does takhfif, meaning he keeps it short. But at the same time, he doesn't compromise on the prayer. So وَإِتْمَامِ الرُّكُوعِ وَالسُّجُودِ, he completes and perfects the ruku' and the sujood. Because you see, either we have a long and relaxed and slow version of prayer, or we have a short and rushed and quick version of prayer. Right? In the sense that qiyam is long, ruku' is long, sujood is long. Or qiyam is very short, so people will read, let's say, Surah Al-Asr, which talks about sabr and patience and amal salih, and that is exactly what they're rushing in. Or they will read Surah Al-Kawthar, which tells us to pray, فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ. Right? But people don't pay attention to the meaning of prayer, of what they're reciting. They will just recite the shortest surah. And in ruku' also, they will barely go down that they will get up. Sajda also, they'll barely go down that they'll get up. So what do we learn? What's the proper way? Do takhfif, but don't leave anything out from the wajibat. Alright? Shorten the prayer, keep it short, but don't compromise on ruku', on sujood, on the other parts of the prayer. Meaning perform every part completely and properly. The sajda doesn't have to be 10 minutes long. It can be 1 minute long even, as long as it has sakina. Right? حدثنا أحمد بن يونس قال حدثنا زهير قال حدثنا إسماعيل قال سمعت قيسا قال أخبرني أبو مسعود أن رجلا قال والله يا رسول الله. A man came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, والله يا رسول الله إني لأتأخر عن صلاة الغداة. I stay back from the prayer, the morning prayer, meaning the Fajr prayer. Why? The only reason why I stay back is min ajli fulanin, because of so and so person. Mimma yutilu bina, because he performs the prayer very, very long. So because of this reason, I don't even go to the masjid, I don't even pray in jama'ah. And that's the only reason. Salah is way too long for me. I don't have the capacity to stand for that long. So the narrator, he said, Abu Mas'ud, he said, فَمَا رَأَيْتُ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ فِي مَوْعِظَةٍ I never saw the Prophet ﷺ when giving an advice, أَشَدَّ غَضَبًا مِنْهُ more angry than that time. Meaning this was the only time when I saw him so angry when advising people. يَوْمَئِذٍ that day. ثُمَّ قَالَ then he said, إِنَّ مِنْكُمْ مُنَفِّرِينَ indeed amongst you are munaffirin. Who are munaffirin? Those who avert people, right? Who turn people away because of the difficulty that they cause them. فَأَيُّكُمْ so any of you مَا صَلَّى بِالنَّاسِ who prays with the people, meaning who leads the people in prayer, what should he do? فَلْيَتَجَوَّزْ remember this word. He should make the prayer short. Why? فَإِنَّ فِيهِمْ because indeed among them are الضعيف the weak, وَالْكَبِير and the aged, the elderly, وَذَا الْحَاجَةِ and people who have certain needs. If you have the strength, everybody does not have that strength. There are people who are weak in their body, they have weak legs, their back aches, they don't have the strength to stand for so long. Then there are those who are old, who are struggling to stay, to stand and pray. And there are people who have to go fulfill their needs. So keep that in mind and lead the people in prayer. How? With takhfif, right? فَلْيَتَجَوَّزْ he should do tajweez. Now what do we learn in this hadith? That first of all, this man, he came and complained to the Prophet ﷺ, right? And he said that I don't go for Jama'ah because the salah is too long. The Prophet ﷺ was not upset with him that you should still go. How can you stay back from Jama'ah? Instead, the Prophet ﷺ was upset with who? The Imam. So this shows that if there is an Imam who habitually leads people in prayer, such that the prayer is very, very long, he's been advised, he's been asked to please shorten the prayer, but he does not do that. And because of this reason, there is a person who stays behind from Jama'ah. Is he sinful? The person who's staying behind from Jama'ah? He is not sinful, but the Imam is at fault. You see, from this we learned that tatweel of the Imam makes it permissible for a person to stay behind from Jama'ah. You understand? It is permissible. And I remember when once we had gone to the Haram and it was Maghrib prayer, first Salah in the Haram on that trip. And I was hoping that, the Salah will be long and nice and beautiful. But again, it was a short prayer, meaning the Qiyam was not very long. And I was kind of surprised that what's going on? People have come here for prayer. Why isn't the Salah long? And I think I mentioned it to my parents, and this is what they pointed out, that there are all kinds of people here. There are women, there are children, there are people who are in the middle of their tawaf, there are people who have been traveling for so long, there are people who have to go eat, there are people who haven't slept in the past 24 hours, there are people who desperately need to go shower, right? So all sorts of people. So keeping that in mind, the Salah is short but not compromised, right? So over here we see that when the Salah is not like that, if it's long and the Imam does not get it, he still leads the people such that the Salah is very long. Are the people allowed to stay back from Jama'ah? Are they allowed? And yes, they are. Yes, that's true. And this shows that the Imam should also use wisdom. When he's leading people in prayer, he should keep the Salah such that each rak'ah is consistent, predictable, so that people don't lose heart. I mean, when you go to the Haram, you see that the Imam, he is aware of this, whoever the Imam is. Right? The length of the prayer is always reasonable. Always reasonable. It was Fard, it was Maghrib. Right? For Taraweeh, again for Taraweeh, they pray 20 and people object at that. Why don't they pray 8? Because if they prayed 8 and they completed a juz, imagine how long each rak'ah would be. So they pray 20. Why? So that the Qiyam is shorter. Why shorter Qiyam? Because there are all sorts of people praying. All sorts of people. Right? So remember, this is actually a very positive thing. Okay. And we also see that the Prophet ﷺ was very upset. Very upset. So this shows that the Imam, whoever the Imam is, should be considerate of this. Okay. But again, shortening the prayer does not mean that it's very, very short. It should be shortened according to the sunnah. Bab إِذَا صَلَّى لِنَفْسِهِ فَلْيُطَوِّلْ مَا شَاءَ. If a person is performing the prayer himself, then he can lengthen it as much as he wills. Right? He can read half of the Quran even if he wants in one rak'ah. But if he has the capacity, go ahead and do it. But if he's leading people in prayer, then he has to be considerate of them. And again, the best way is the way of the Prophet ﷺ. Even when he prayed qiyam, nafil, when he prayed himself, it wasn't his usual habit that he would read 3 or 4 very long surahs in one rak'ah. Right? حدثنا عبد الله بن يوسف قال أخبرنا مالك عن أبي الزناد عن الأعرج عن أبي هريرة أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إذا صلى أحدكم للناس فليخفف. When one of you leads the people in prayer, then he should keep it short and light. فإن منهم الضعيف, because indeed among them are weak, والسقيم, and sick, والكبير, and old. وإذا صلى أحدكم لنفسه, and when one of you prays himself, فليطول ما شاء, then he can make it as long as he wishes. باب من شكى إمامه إذا طول, the one who complains about who? The imam. When? إذا طول, when the imam makes the prayer very long. So if the imam is making the prayer very long, are the people allowed to complain? Yes. To who? At home amongst their family members. What should they do? To the imam or to the person who can tell the imam? Right? Because this is what we see happened at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. The man, he went and complained to the Prophet ﷺ. Why? Because he knew that Sahabi would listen to the Prophet ﷺ. Right? So it is permissible. And in fact, it should be done. Because the person who is leading the people in prayer, who is used to reciting the Quran, for him it's not difficult. And he doesn't even realize. And once he starts, he enjoys it. He doesn't want to stop then. And it may have happened with you as well. That if you're reciting yourself, then you're like, okay, I'll go another page. I'll go another page. Let me just complete this surah. Let me just complete this juz. Right? Because you're the one who's reciting, so you enjoy it. But for the people who are standing behind you listening, for them it can get difficult. Right? So it's necessary to make the imam aware if the people are struggling, so that he can adjust accordingly and everybody can benefit. وقال أبو أسيد, and Abu Usaid said, طولت بنا يا بني. Oh my son, طولت بنا, you have made the prayer very long for us. Because he must have been old compared to his son. So he didn't have in himself the capacity to stand for that long. So he told his son. So it shows that it's permissible. One may do that right after the salah, and one may do that afterwards also, whenever it's appropriate. حدثنا محمد بن يوسف حدثنا سفيان عن إسماعيل بن أبي خالد عن قيس بن أبي حازم عن أبي مسعود قال قال رجل يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, a man said that إني لأتأخر عن الصلاة في الفجر, I stay back from the Fajr prayer, meaning I don't go to the masjid and pray in Jama'ah, مما يطيل بنا فلان فيها, because of so and so person, he performs the prayer too long. فغضب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ما رأيته غضب في موضع كان أشد غضبا منه يومئذ. I didn't see him upset as he was that day. ثم قال, then he said, يا أيها الناس إن منكم منفرين فمن أما الناس فليتجوز فإن خلفه الضعيف والكبير وذا الحاجة. So we see the Prophet ﷺ was very firm, because the matter was very serious. If you think about Mu'adh bin Jabal also, he scolded him. Fattan, not once, 3 times. And over here, inna minkum munaffirin, that one should always be considerate of the people who are behind him, who are with him, who are supporting him, who are inevitably going to be affected by what he's doing. Right? Whether it's in a social gathering or in the prayer, in any situation, you should be considerate of them. But one more thing we must remember is that, you see, the capacity has to be built. Right? It has to be built. So for example, some people might even find Surah Al-Shams very long. They just want قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ إِنَّا أَعْطَيْنَاكَ الْكَوْثَرَ. Right? But that is what? That is on the other extreme. The best way is the way of the Prophet ﷺ. So anything less than that, remember, it is not tatweel. Way of the Prophet ﷺ, that is not tatweel. That is something that we have to follow. So yes, there are times when people will complain and they will show that they're not interested, but it's okay. Do it. Gradually, they'll get used to it. Right? And build it gradually. Like for example, a child, when he goes to school, initially, he finds sitting for 2 minutes even very difficult. But then what happens after a month? The capacity increases. After 3 months, capacity increases even more. Right? So that capacity has to be built. But again, it should not be that we expect too much of people. And what is expecting too much of people? That which is more than the sunnah. Okay? حدثنا آدم بن أبي إياس قال حدثنا شعبة قال حدثنا محارب بن الدثار قال سمعت جابر بن عبد الله الأنصاري قال أقبل رجل بناضحين. A man came with ناضحين. What are ناضحين? Camels. Which kind of camels that are used for agricultural purposes? So perhaps these camels were used for irrigation or something like that. So بناضحين وقد جنح الليل, and the night had fallen, meaning it had become dark. Now imagine a man is coming to the masjid with 2 of his camels, and it's obvious he's coming from his field, and it has become dark. What does that show about this man? He's been working all day, and he's coming straight from his work, right? And it's become so late in the night. Now what happened? فَوَافَقَ مُعَاذًا يُصَلِّي. So he joined Mu'adh in the prayer. Meaning he found Mu'adh performing the prayer. So this man, فَتَرَكَ نَاضِحَهُ, he left his nadih, meaning his camel. Do you have the word taraka or baraka? Okay, so in some versions you'll find taraka. Taraka is that he left them. And baraka is that he made them kneel. He made them sit. So فَتَرَكَ نَاضِحَهُ وَأَقْبَلَ إِلَى مُعَاذ, and he went towards Mu'adh, meaning in order to join him in prayer. فَقَرَأَ بِسُورَةِ الْبَقَرَةِ أَوِ النِّسَاءِ, and Mu'adh bin Jabal, he recited Surah Al-Baqarah or Nisa. فَانْطَلَقَ الرَّجُلُ, so the man, he just left. وَبَلَغَهُ, and it reached him, the news reached this man, that أَنَّ مُعَاذًا نَالَ مِنْهُ, that Mu'adh was upset with him. So this man, فَأَتَى النَّبِيَّ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم, he came to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, فَشَكَى إِلَيْهِ مُعَاذًا, and he complained to him. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يا معاذ أفتان أنت؟ O Mu'adh, are you putting people in fitna? أو فاتن or fatin? ثلاث مرار. He said this 3 times. فلولا صليت, then why did you not perform the prayer? بسبح اسم ربك الأعلى, with Surah Al-A'la. والشمس وضحاها, with Surah Al-Shams. والليل إذا يغشى, with Surah Al-Layl. فإنه يصلي وراءك الكبير والضعيف وذو الحاجة. All sorts of people pray behind you. Old, weak, people who have certain needs to fulfill. So the narrator, he said, أحسب هذا في الحديث. I think this was part of the hadith. قال أبو عبد الله, Imam Bukhari said, وتابعه سعيد بن مسروق ومسعر والشيباني قال عمرو وعبيد الله بن مقسم وأبو الزبير عن جابر قرأ معاذ في العشاء بالبقرة. So the narrator, he said that Mu'adh actually recited Baqarah, not Nisa. وتابعه الأعمش عن محارب, because earlier there was a confusion. It was either Baqarah or Nisa. So another narrator, he said it was Baqarah. Now we see that the Prophet ﷺ, he accepted the complaint, and he showed his great disapproval, and he showed it with anger. Because sometimes a little bit of anger is effective, but sometimes, not all the time, right? Because the purpose was islah, correction, for the good of people. Bab al-ijaz fi as-salati wa ikmaliha. Al-ijaz. Earlier we learned the word فَلْيَتَجَوَّزْ. So ijaz is to shorten. So shortening the prayer, but at the same time paying attention to its ikmal, perfection also. Alright? In other words, performing the minimum. Okay? Performing the minimum, so keeping it short but complete. Not that in trying to shorten the prayer, one leaves out certain portions completely. So for example, in the first, second rak'ah, a person is reciting only Surah Al-Fatiha in order to keep the prayer short. Is that correct? No. He should recite Surah Al-Fatiha and also another surah. Complete the prayer. حدثنا أبو معمر قال حدثنا عبد الوارث قال حدثنا عبد العزيز عن أنس قال كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يوجز الصلاة ويكملها. He would keep the prayer short, but he would also perform it perfectly. باب من أخف الصلاة عند بكاء الصبي. The one who shortened the prayer on the buka as-sabi. What is buka? Crying. Of who? As-sabi? Children. Meaning he hears children crying, babies crying, so what does he do? He shortens the prayer. Now the previous chapters were about keeping the prayer short in consideration of who? People who are standing in prayer. They might be old, they might be weak, they might be sick, they might have something to do. So being considerate of them, shorten the prayer. Now this bab is about keeping the salah short while being considerate of who? Are the children performing the prayer? Okay, the mother is. But how many mothers are there? And how many mothers actually have babies who are crying? Maybe 1 or 2? Maximum 4? I mean, compared to the jama'ah, compared to the people who are performing the salah, that's a very, very small minority. Right? And even if the child is crying, the mother can still carry on her prayer, and she can hold the baby and carry on and continue the prayer, right? So this bab is about mainly who? About who? The people who are going to be affected because of the salah. Shortening the prayer because of crying children. Crying children are not praying. They're not praying the salah. But they're going to be affected by the length of the salah. They are going to be affected by the length of the salah. So you see, salah will be shortened. Why? When there is even one person who needs the prayer to be shortened because of his situation. Alright? Now, sometimes a person might say, oh, Isha is very late, everybody's come back from work, so let's keep it short because majority of the people are tired and exhausted. Majority. Okay, another situation could be that there are 3 people who are very tired right now, or there's an uncle who's very old. So because of him, we will shorten the prayer. Now, majority, 3 people, 1 person even, if he is part of the congregation and his situation is such that he cannot perform the salah for a very long time, then what do we learn from this? Salah will be shortened even because of who? 1 person. And salah will be shortened even because of those people who are not praying the salah, but who will be affected by the salah. You see the beauty over here? And who are they? The children. حدثنا إبراهيم بن موسى قال أخبرنا الوليد قال حدثنا الأوزاعي عن يحيى ابن أبي كثير عن عبد الله بن أبي قتادة عن أبيه أبي قتادة عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إني لأقوم في الصلاة. Indeed, I stand in the prayer أريد أن أطول فيها, and I wish to make the prayer long. فأسمع بكاء الصبي. Then I hear the crying of a baby. فأتجوز في صلاتي. Then I shorten my prayer. كراهية, out of dislike, أن أشق على أمه, that I will make it difficult for his mother. His mother will be in difficulty. This is the only reason why I shortened the prayer. تابعه بشر بن بكر وابن المبارك وبقية عن الأوزاعي. Next hadith is also similar. حدثنا خالد بن مخلد قال حدثنا سليمان بن بلال قال حدثنا شريك بن عبد الله قال سمعت أنس بن مالك يقول ما صليت وراء إمام قط. I have never performed the prayer behind any imam ever أخف صلاة, that was lighter, ولا أتم, nor perfect, من النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, than the prayer of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. Meaning, I have never prayed behind anybody whose prayer was shorter and more perfect than the prayer of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. Meaning his prayer was always short and it was always perfect. وَإِن كَانَ لَيَسْمَعُ بُكَاءَ الصَّبِيِّ. And if he would hear the crying of a child, فَيُخَفِّفُ, he would shorten the prayer, مَخَافَةَ أَن تُفْتَنَ أُمُّهُ, out of fear that his mother would be in fitna. Earlier we learned أَشُقَّ عَلَى أُمِّهِ. Here, fitna, that she won't be able to concentrate in prayer. Have you ever been in a situation where you're somewhere and your child is crying and it's embarrassing? You want to get out of that situation, but you can't also. You don't know whether you should attend to your child or you should do what you're doing. You cannot focus at all. And the child, if he's crying, that means he just wants you. And sometimes the child, all he wants is that you look at him. You just look at him. Or you just sit with him. right? And he's not going to stop crying until you look at him. And you cannot do that in the salah. So while you're praying, can you focus? It's so difficult. It's so difficult. So the Prophet ﷺ was so considerate that he would shorten the prayer just because of the crying of babies. حدثنا علي بن عبد الله قال حدثنا يزيد بن زريع قال حدثنا سعيد قال حدثنا قتادة أن أنس بن مالك حدثه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إني لأدخل في الصلاة وأنا أريد إطالتها. I enter the prayer, meaning I begin the prayer and I intend to make it long. فأسمع بكاء الصبي, then I hear the crying of a child. فأتجوز في صلاتي, I shorten it. مما أعلم, because I know من شدة وجد أمه من بكائه. I know the shiddah of the wajd. I know the intensity of the anxiety of the mother. I know what anxiety she's experiencing because her child is crying. Min bukaihi. This was the Prophet ﷺ. He understood that a woman will be anxious when the child is crying. And women really become very anxious when their babies are crying. You know, like a woman is in the house cooking something and she'll hear and she will run. Yes, sometimes other women are insensitive. I mean, they see a child crying and the mother is kind of getting worried, but they say, no, I'll hold the baby. The baby needs the mother. People get upset with the mother. You should not be here in the masjid. A very beautiful lesson. Jazakillah khair for pointing that out. It happens many times. We see that the Prophet ﷺ is shortening the prayer because a child is crying and the child needs the mother and the mother is getting anxious. But sometimes what happens? The mothers even don't care about their children. They're talking on the phone or they're, on the computer or doing something and the child is crying but they will not pay attention. And this will actually affect the child. The child will develop certain insecurities even, right? So if the prayer is being shortened to attend to the child, why can we not cut short our conversation on the telephone or the work that we're doing to pay attention to the child at that moment, right? Salatul Jumu'ah is not mandatory on women. They were not required to go to the masjid. But whenever they came, the women came to the masjid, they were welcomed. Even in this way, the Prophet ﷺ accommodated the women to such an extent that he would shorten the prayer because of a crying child. It is these minorities that are usually neglected, right? Like we learned earlier, al-kabir, the elderly, al-da'if, the weak ones, right? Likewise, saqim, sick person, dhal-haja, person who has a need. And here about a mother, women. But this is why the women were able to raise such children, because they went to the masjid from such a young age and they loved the Prophet ﷺ, also the children, because he accommodated them so beautifully. حدثنا محمد بن بشار قال حدثنا ابن أبي عدي عن سعيد عن قتادة عن أنس بن مالك عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إني لأدخل في الصلاة فأريد إطالتها فأسمع بكاء الصبي فأتجوز مما أعلم من شدة وجد أمه من بكائه. وقال موسى حدثنا أبان حدثنا قتادة حدثنا أنس عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم مثله. Now from this we see that the prayer may be shortened when there is a need in the salah. Right? Someone is crying, someone got hurt, there is an emergency, and for that reason, the Imam, he shortens the prayer. That is completely permissible. Now on the same note, the ulama said, salah may even be made long in order to accommodate certain people. The salah may be lengthened in order to accommodate certain people. How? For example, a person is leading the salah, he's reciting a surah. Alright, and he's about to reach the end of the surah. And he knows that people are coming in the masjid, in the musalla, in order to join. Now if he ends the surah and goes into ruku', they've missed the rak'ah. Right? Or according to other scholars, if he gets up from the ruku', they've missed the rak'ah. So he starts reciting very slowly. Or he says, let me just add Surah Al-Ikhlas. They'll be able to catch the rak'ah. Can he do that? Yes, he can. But not that he keeps doing it for the next 15 minutes so that everybody can catch the first rak'ah, because then who will be suffering? Those who came first. Right? So salah may be shortened in order to accommodate people, and it may also be lengthened in order to accommodate certain others. But this really depends on the situation, and the Imam should use his wisdom at that moment. Yeah, they're walking in even after the salah is over. So how much can the imam wait? Right? Alright, inshallah we'll conclude over here. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.